So I wanted to welcome you to coming here today with us for another Forward Motion session. This is part of the Building a Resilient and Vibrant Workforce series that we've done with Tourism HR. And specifically this topic today being attracting, building, and retaining an Indigenous workforce, it was natural that we would bring the leads for Ontario that we're working on this project together on, and most certainly having Kevin Eshkawkogan here from Indigenous Tourism Ontario. So thank you for joining us. Once again, just reminding you that we do forward motion sessions, not every week, but on occasion. And these are really educational webinars for you to be able to use as resources. They're available on our website afterwards for you to go back to if you are right now needing to work on your business, so that we understand that we love the fact that you're actually out there doing tourism. And so, but these are available for you at any point in time to go back and use and utilize to help you have forward motion as we continue going on. So with that, I am going to start off with our land acknowledgement, and then I will introduce you to the panel. So a strong and healthy community relies on relationships built on mutual trust and respect. These relationships start with self, then extend outwards to others and the land, including the water, the plants, and the animals sharing the land. It is an individual and collective responsibility to develop and maintain a healthy relationship with the land. The land gives us everything we need to survive and to create a healthy community. It is the relationship to land that centers the culture of our community. Trust is what we at TIAO have with Indigenous Tourism Ontario and OTEC as partners. We have a strong desire to complement, not duplicate, collaborate in our strength, but be humble in our learnings and our awareness in our willingness to learn. This community of collaboration was the desire to develop just one of our shared initiatives of a Three Fires collaborative quest that you'll hear about later. We recognize that our work as an industry, as a business, and as leaders, and the work of our community partners take place on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Haudenosaunee. We acknowledge and respect that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory that we now call Ontario. We acknowledge and embrace that all Ontarians are treaty people. TIAO is thankful the original hosts were welcome. TIAO is thankful the original hosts welcome visitors to work, live, and benefit in these territories. We are also thankful for the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Haudenosaunee peoples who have cared for these territories for thousands of years. And we are thankful for the Indigenous communities who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario. TIAO and ITO are honored to collaborate with each other and to serve the wide variety of Indigenous and non-Indigenous businesses, stakeholders, and communities throughout the territory. And we are also committed to improving the socioeconomic conditions of Indigenous peoples through respectful tourism development, and will do so hand in hand for years to come. So going beyond a land acknowledgement is to honor our communities. Look within, acknowledge where you've come from and the rich histories and worldviews that have shaped you into who you are today. Creating meaningful relationships with the Indigenous people within your region is one way to acknowledge the collective strength of the community and our shared responsibilities to protecting the land. Knowing where we come from and where our ancestors have walked before us help us to better understand our role and our responsibility to the community. Through our relationships with others, we build healthy communities and reaffirm our responsibility to maintain a loving and respectful relationship with the land. We do this for future generations by building more sustainable, loving, nurturing, safe, healthy, diverse, and thriving communities that are infused with respect for the land. This is just the start of how we can attract, build, and work on retention of an Indigenous workforce. With that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel today. As I mentioned, Kevin Eshkawkogan is here with the Indigenous Tourism Ontario. We have Adam Morrison from Ontario Tourism Education Corporation, also known as OTEC. I am here with you on the panel as well, and we are moderated by Tourism HR with Isabelle de Bruyn. Over to you, Isabelle.
Thank you very much, Carol. So I'm going to share my screen now. Perfect. Can you see the screen presentation? Okay. So hello, bonjour, Annie. and welcome to this webinar. My name is Isabelle de Bruyn, and I'm the Vice President of Labour Market Intelligence with Tourism HR Canada. Today's topic is one that I'm really excited about. Indigenous peoples are the fastest growing population in Canada, and there are tremendous opportunities to welcome Indigenous talent into the tourism workplace. This webinar is part of the Forward Motion webinar series with our partners at the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario and Tourism HR Canada's Discover Tourism initiative. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Government of Canada for providing the funding and support to develop this webinar series. The first 3 webinars in the series explored working with international talent, building a team that stays, and creating an attractive compensation package. If you missed them, you can download the webinar recording and PowerPoint presentation from TIAO's Forward Motion webpage. If you've attended our past webinars, first of all, I'd like to say thank you. And secondly, you'll notice that the format for this webinar will be a little bit different. Today, instead of having one main presenter, I'm thrilled to introduce our panel of experts or follow up with what Carol said earlier. They'll be discussing working with Indigenous talent and their experience working together on the innovative initiative called a 3-Fire Collaborative Quest. Leading the panel today is Kevin Eshkawkogan, CEO of Indigenous Tourism Ontario. He's joined by Adam Morrison of the Ontario Tourism Education Corporation. And from TIAO, we have Carol Greenwood. Welcome, everyone. Before we dive into what promises to be a fascinating discussion, I do want to let you know that we will have time for a short Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If you have questions during the panel, please add them to the chat and we'll get through as many as we can this hour. Without further ado, let's begin our discussion. So Kevin, Indigenous tourism is one of the fastest growing segments in the industry. Can you tell us about Indigenous tourism in Ontario and how ITO is working to develop it?
Absolutely, Isabelle. Miigwech. First, so Ani Bojo Gignane Indigenous cause, the Donising Donjaba, Ginoje Dodem, and really simply that's I come from a place called Spirit Island. My name, as it's been given to me or reminded to me, it's the man who speaks for the people, loosely translated. But yeah, I can tell you a lot about Indigenous tourism in Ontario, and for those who haven't heard me speak, it's something I'm very passionate about and get to speak for quite some time on. So let's just move into some of the information that I've provided for us there. We want to switch the slides. There we go. So simply put, Indigenous tourism Ontario is about improving the socioeconomic conditions of Indigenous people. We do that by focusing on 4 pillars, which we can get into now. And it's all about helping grow the economy on many fronts, but it's not just for Indigenous people. It benefits everybody. So let's jump into the 4 pillars there as well. Moving on, just some quick stats here. Sorry about that. Ontario is home to the largest Indigenous tourism industry as per that previous slide, as put out pre-pandemic. There are still reports that need to be done now. Here's some important information. We can move on from that. So, roughly $622 million contributed to the GDP. And all of this, here's a little snapshot of what has happened during the pandemic and as we're coming out into the recovery phase. Something that's really important as per this discussion today. There was about 4,000 jobs that were lost during the pandemic in the Indigenous tourism industry, and we all know that we're in a labor crisis right now. So one of the things that we often say at Indigenous Tourism Ontario is we're not the solution to the labor shortage or the labor crisis, but we're a part of the solution. And there's many parts of that solution that need to come into play. But this is a quick little snapshot of where we're at. And we're expecting this year to be a really good one for the Indigenous tourism industry, where we're back to pre-COVID numbers as we were tracking. And we'll see some growth moving forward for numerous reasons, which we'll get into a little bit as we cover the next 4 pillars, or the 4 pillars as we cover those now. So before we get into the 4 pillars, I need to identify what we call the 4 directions and all the partners and players that need to come in to help the industry grow. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because there's a lot more players at the table than the ones that are identified there in this one slide. But simply put, we need the industry. We need Indigenous leadership to endorse the work that we're doing. Of course, we need our provincial and regional partners, and then also our national partners. So there's, quite a gamut of individuals there that we want to work with to make some things happen. So let's move on to the 4 pillars, because that's the fun work, Isabelle. The 4 pillars, there's 4 that we identify, and this is all based on medicine wheel teachings, but cultural authenticity or cultural integrity is always at the forefront. Marketing and branding is always relevant in the tourism industry and when you're doing consumer work. Product development in terms of facilities and activities and experiences, transportation, food and beverage, whatever it may be, is always very critical in our sector, in our industry. And then to make it all work, we need people to do these amazing things. And that's where the focus is in terms of workforce development and helping address the labor crisis. So let's jump into this just a little bit more, Isabelle. Let's move forward there.
Okay, so Kevin, can you let us know a little bit what makes Indigenous tourism workforce development different from other industry segments?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we focus on 4 different areas. We try to build the whole industry collectively, and when we do that, there's different little sections within each of the 4 pillars, and that's our governance model for this. But what's different about it is it's simply enough. I'll tell this quick little story. Is let's just reflect. Actually, we don't need a story for this. It's pretty simple. There's people who have been hosting on these lands for a long time. Okay, before the current structures that we had, there was people here hosting people, welcoming people, and it's sometimes often controversial when I say this, but it's not meant to be offensive, and most people don't take offense to it. And at the root of it all is, we're in an era of reconciliation with the First Nations people in this country, and a lot of people will think, well, things like land back are meant to ask people to leave, and that's not necessarily accurate. And when we look at all this for hundreds, if not thousands of years, depending on who you talk to, we've been hosting people on these lands. So it's natural and holistic that, Indigenous people are involved in the tourism industry, hosting and, being hospitable to people in this time and age. And as we focus specifically on workforce development or the individuals that are hosting people in the modern context, we want to make sure that they're set up for success. And what makes it different is we're just naturally hospitable. When you think of, the idea of land back, for example, or you're thinking of, Indigenous people getting involved in the industry, and there's still some friction within the country, within certain segments, at least and I can't speak for anybody, Isabelle, but I haven't heard anybody say, hey, listen, every settler that's come here and now time to leave. Never heard that. In all of my time doing what I've done, I'm 45 years old. I've never heard anyone say, hey, you guys better get going now. Your visit's been overstayed. So with that, we try to do things in a very mutually beneficial way and collaborative approach. And that's the basis for a lot of the work that we do. And as we're in this, what makes it different is we're always welcoming, Isabelle. And when we think about Indigenous people, it's about how do we work together. Here's a very simple teaching that has been shared with me since I was very young, and it's about tolerance. And there's obviously much more to it than that, but we got to think there aren't wrong ways, just different ways. And what we need to do collectively is try to figure out what are the similarities in things that we're trying to do, and how do we collaborate to make something positive happen for everybody involved. And something like the Three Fires Collaborative Quest, which I know we'll talk more about, and I want to get Carol and Adam some time to speak on their perspectives as well. But that's something that is definitely something that brings the group together, not just the Indigenous people who are hosting, but the collective industry. And with a legacy of colonialism in this country that still affects not just Indigenous people, but everybody. It's in the structures of how we do business together. That's what the legacy of colonialism is to me. It's not just about things, don't get me wrong, and I shouldn't say just, it's not about things that are negative and in the media, that have happened to Indigenous people. It's about our whole structure. And it's in a state of evolution right now for the positive, right? And when you take this type of thing into your perspectives, and you start to look at it from a different lens, through a different lens, where you're trying to feel, the experience from someplace here, versus just through here in your eyes, and you're feeling it in your heart and your spirit, a lot of things change. And when you feel genuinely welcomed, that's a place that you enjoy going to, and you're going to want to come back to. And it starts with the people, not just Indigenous people, but all people that are hosting. And this type of training that we've collaborated with OTEC and TIAO on developing, it does that sort of thing. It helps set people up for success. And it's all about, ensuring that we're sharing these lands together, as was part of the intent of the treaties. So, that's some of the stuff that makes us different in terms of that, Isabelle. But there's a ton. We could talk about this all day, and I'm trying to be mindful that we cover all of the topics that we've agreed to talk to today, because we've only got an hour together. So I'll leave it at that. Miigwech.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kevin. Yes, it's it's making sure that everybody is on the ground of collaboration and understanding each other's perspective, I think. And culture at work is very, very important for the visitors, but also for the workers. So it's very important to have that culture of understanding and openness. What would be what would you say would be the keys to success in Ontario regarding that, Indigenous talent and the workforce?
Yeah, so when we look at the 4 pillars, and we don't need to go back to that slide, but when you think about it, building an industry, it needs to include all of those things, but the people are at the heart of it. And when we look at, keys to success in Ontario, or in any other region for that matter, looking at how we do things, how we engage with consumers is really critical. And I'm not trying to put the Indigenous perspective and approach on a pedestal by any means. It's just, there's different ways of doing things. And sometimes we just need to explore those and take what's good and meaningful to us as individuals who are exploring it, and apply it to what's going on. The easiest way for me to describe this in one sense is, telling a simple story about my time at the Great Spirit Circle Trail, where we talked about, developing experiences. And for those who know me, know that my background is not tourism. It is now, because it's almost taken up, not taken up. It's been a part of my life for almost half of my life. And when we started out the Great Spirit Circle Trail over 20 years ago, I was tasked with developing experiences for FIT travelers. And I had no background in that. I had no training in that. Mm-hmm. And they kind of described to me what it was. And I said, okay, I think I can handle that. And how I started that process was I simply asked my coworkers and my family, and I encouraged my coworkers to ask their family in the same way. And I said, listen, we're doing, Indigenous tourism, or back then it would have been called Aboriginal tourism. I said, how did our grandparents and our ancestors host people? And the answer was really simple, and it was resoundingly the same across the board for everyone. It was they gave them something to drink, they gave them something to eat, and they were kind to them and just visited with them, spent time with them, telling stories, often doing an activity. So we developed a ton of activities around that simple concept. And when you think back, man, it's so, it's obvious. How did we had a name? And it was called experiential tourism. And that experiential tourism approach is very holistic. Mm-hmm. And we asked, how did you do this? And why did you do this, that, and every other little thing? It turned out, we were just being true to ourselves. We were being authentic to ourselves. We were delivering activities with integrity. And, we didn't have any fancy names for it. We were just simply enough treating people the way we wanted to be treated. which has all kinds of fancy terms nowadays, and we've labeled it, which is totally fine. But it's, it's really simple and basic and fundamental in terms of our human interaction. And as we moved on, we didn't even realize it, Isabelle, but when we were doing, before it even had a term, was we were doing transformative tourism.
Mhm.
And we were changing people's perspectives on the world. Their worldviews were changing by coming to see us at our time on the Great Spirit Circle Trail. So when we think about this, we try to share these stories with Indigenous operators and others. And what makes everybody unique, whether they're Indigenous, they're French, they're German, whatever it may be, is they're themselves. It's them. They are true to who they are. Whenever we've shared how to do cultural tourism, for example, around the world, which we've done, we simply say this: be true to who you are. If I start doing something that's not true to my culture, consumers are smart. They're going to see through it, and they're not going to say that was a great experience. If I pretend to be Adam, people are going to know. Okay, so when we talk about the keys to success, is we all need to be true to ourselves, but also support each other. And when we do this, we've got to do this in a holistic way that's, helpful to others. We need to mentor each other, share our teachings. Another fundamental teaching in my culture is, if you have knowledge, it's your responsibility to share it. If somebody needs that knowledge, it's your job to share that. That's part of your role in life. If Carol needs something from me in terms of what's up in here or what's in my heart, I'm obligated to share with her. It's really that simple. Now, she doesn't ask me too much about what's up here anymore these days because she's pretty smart herself, but that's the whole point of it. And some of these keys to success are simply enough collaboration, right? We've done a lot of collaborating over the pandemic, and 30 Fires Collaborative Quest is a great example of that. My honest, genuine fear about all of this as we come out of the pandemic and are in the state of recovery is we are going to abandon that collaborative approach. And it's going to be every organization for itself again.
Yeah, back to normal, which is not
yeah.
which is not where we want to go.
No, we want to grow things and evolve things, right? So with that, we want to do some things. I want to show you a little video that's on here. If we can stay on this screen, or keep this screen after the video. But Isabelle, if I can play that little video, it's going to show you something that's just a little bit different that I think is a key to success, not just in Ontario, but in other places.
What, James Swick? Hello, people. My name is Stan Wesley. I am a Cree living in incredible Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. And right now I'm in a peaceful place. And when I'm out in places like this, I can't help but think of the ones that came before me. Ancestors. What they saw, what they heard, how they lived. The beauty and the wonder and the mystery. Let me tell you, that stuff belongs to you. It is ours. It has been passed down. It is within us to learn. It is within us to share with the world. Our ancestors, the original hosts within our homelands, people journeyed a long way to be with them. So what did they do? Similar to what we do. We showcase the best of who we are, whether it's 2 minutes, 2 hours, or 2 days. We can create an incredible guest experience. We are going to untap all of that stuff during this workshop. Ms. Swick, people, my friends, your journey begins now.
What a great video. What a great testimony from a person that really wants to share their own story.
Well, yeah, and I just, every time I see that video, I've seen it numerous times. I can't even count the number of times. The energy from that individual is absolutely contagious.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing that.
To help build the Indigenous tourism industry. Yeah, no, it's something that we want to help instill pride with people in, right? So I know we've got more we got to cover, Isabelle. I'll pass it back to you and Adam and Carol.
Well, I'm going to turn to Carol and Adam now, and maybe if you can speak a little bit about the spirit of collaboration in a personal and organic way. So, looking for change, honesty, finding shared values. So I'll start with Adam, please.
Sure, happy to. I mean, I'll think back a few years. I think, Kevin, you and I probably got involved in the tourism industry around the same time. OTEC, though, long before me, had been working with Indigenous partners like the Métis Nation and various Indigenous institutes and communities for quite a while. But when you were involved in Great Spirit Circle Trail, came to start working together, and it seemed to make sense to connect the dots, between the different networks and try and find alignment. I think we worked on a few really interesting projects along the way. But really early on, I think our approaches were similar in that it was about capacity building more than necessarily like transactions and selling projects. And it was about building the skills and infrastructure across the network. And when I say connecting dots, I mean connecting people and communities so that they can kind of grow themselves. So I mean, that's kind of becoming ingrained in OTEC's approach over the years, and likely by working with and learning from partners like you and others. That we actually have a graphic on our website now that's trying to depict that, as we're working with a partner or a client or a community, OTEC's involvement should reduce over time, and that partner should be taking more and becoming stronger. I mean, to me, that's good consulting, but I think it's also about empowerment. And really thinking about the grassroots and how we can build strength, and only that way I think really start to scale our collective impact. So I say it's a matter of helping and stepping back, but I think part of the success is also that the relationships are nurtured long term, and it's focusing on that trust that we continue to build. Always, as you mentioned, exactly, flagging opportunities for one another, regardless of any impact on our own organizations, and making sure that we're supporting and advocating regardless of our own interests. You mentioned reconciliation, Kevin. I mean, OTEC is moving along our own reconciliation path. I'd like to think that these relationships and the spirit of them, and I believe our shared approach to the work provide an organization like OTEC with a decent foundation, but we quite clearly have a long way to go, before we can consider ourselves to be even strong in this area. But it's in listening to partners like ITO and learning from you along the way that we start to grow our own understanding. You mentioned learning from Indigenous ways. I shared this recently. We were updating an MOU, and within that MOU, we used the Grandfather's 7 teachings as a set of principles within it. And I looked at it and I said, why don't all of OTEC's MOUs include the 7 teachings? I mean, they really truly summarize the spirit of how we should be working with partners. And that's an example of us learning from that collaboration. Back to connecting the dots as I started, I think all of us, ITO, TIAO, OTEC have become a bit better at it. And maybe it's as a result of the pandemic and, that trial by fire coming together towards a common, set of priorities. Maybe it's just that we're more mature. I don't know, but we've been collaborating more closely than we ever have before. I know in our own workforce development work, ITO and TIAO are really critical members of tourism skills in Ontario, and helping us to do that alignment across a very, very big province of a complex network of stakeholders. And I'd have to agree, like, this is something that Ontario should be very, very proud of, but not take for granted. Our industry is prone to fragmentation, and we have to really double down and take advantage of this ground that we've gained, and continue to kind of nurture it moving forward.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, for your sharing. Carol, what's on your mind?
Okay. Thanks, Isabelle. Yeah, I mean, what Adam said resonates very much. When I did the land acknowledgement and welcome, I talked about the fact that I trust, TIAO trusts ITO and they trust OTEC. And, this isn't for lack of effort put in. I mean, one of the things that we talked about, we joked about, how things used to be, or, prior to the pandemic and things like that. And I find that our industry, can be competitive. And, one of the things is that we have, a lot of us have small teams. We're an industry that's made up of small business operators. And so, at TIAO, we are a lot about efficiencies and about how to do things smarter and sort of more effective. And, when I looked at the work that we were doing with OTEC, sometimes there was duplication and, we wanted to work more with ITO. And so it was like, why not elevate and, have the experts in their own area work together and let's figure out a way of collaboration. And so over time, it's, I say I trust, but that doesn't mean to say that I always agree with Kevin or that I always agree with Adam. And when I say I'm speaking of TIAO. But I think in trust, that allows you to be able to ask questions and to say, I don't think that's exactly right, or to challenge each other because we all have that same objective of working together. And so I can say I don't agree with something or I don't like something, or I think one of the things that I still do with Kevin a lot is I ask a ton of questions, sometimes heart, sometimes mind, sometimes just for clarification, to understand, like, am I doing this right? And Kevin very clearly will tell me, no, actually you're not. And then there's an opportunity for learning. And so I think that sort of has, that sort of safe space. Sometimes it's, you're
Yeah.
afraid to ask those questions, because you're like, you want to do the right thing, but are you doing the right thing? But because there's that trust now, and that we can ask those questions and be told we're doing it wrong, it allows us to move forward better and allows us to continue to collaborate and work with strength as opposed to being competitive. And so I think that in of itself, it's allowed us to move forward. And with that, um, we've been working with Kevin to work with other people within Indigenous Tourism Ontario and with other operators that are Indigenous operators. And it's allowed us to, that we're just not speaking to Kevin, although speaking to Kevin is great, but it's, really working within our own communities. And that's one of the things about this is that, I talked about that it's really important to reach out and ask questions and reach out to the Indigenous tourism operators within your own region. And because what I have found is that they're very open to asking a question. Kevin talked about, be yourself. Well, like how we are with our friends and with our family, we can have those honest conversations. We're always wanting to talk to them. And I find that I speak to Adam or Adam's team at OTEC and with ITO's team almost on a daily basis, if not weekly basis, because they're just part of the conversation now. It's part of that moving forward with what we want to do. And so to me, you got to ask questions. You got to feel okay with asking questions.
In safe spaces. Yeah, you're right. So can you tell us a little more about this Three Fires collaborative quest and how the partnership works? So I'm going to turn to Kevin for his side of the story.
Yeah, if we want to pull up the logo on that last slide we had,
Yeah,
that's a good reference point. It's great to see it. And I'll just make this this little bad joke first. Although Carol may not always agree with me, I always agree with Carol. Just saying. So moving on here, Carol. The Three Fires Collaborative Quest, something we're very, very proud of. Okay, because it is something that was, I would say, probably not even a consideration 10 years ago. And I would want to say, and I'll let our partners give their perspective as well, but with a couple of things have brought this to the forefront. And I'll say this, for my 20 plus years in the industry, workforce development has always been a struggle, especially when you're trying to develop from a regional perspective. So our time, as Adam was alluding to earlier, we started around the same time in the early 2000s, and yeah, even back then we were dabbling with experimenting with how to engage Indigenous people in the workforce. And the Three Fires Collaborative Quest came together rather organically, inspired by the Three Fires Confederacy. So as an Anishinaabe person, you know, the Three Fires Confederacy is our governance structures. And it's a little bit different. And if you think of it, there's three different parties involved. So there's three fires there that are burning together. And the root of the lessons around this is, and the keys to success in a model like this is, we all just do our jobs. We talk a lot, we ask questions, you know, we don't always necessarily agree, but we talk it out and we figure out the solution that's best for the end goal, which is usually for the communal good. That's the end goal in a lot of cases of what we do. But I want to explain how the connections there. And for those who may not be familiar with the Three Fires Confederacy, it's made up of the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. And I'm giving you a very short interpretation of what that confederacy is about. Each of those nations had their own role within the Three Fires Confederacy. For example, the Ojibwe, they were the providers, the Odawa were the warriors, and the Potawatomi were the firekeepers. And when we think of this particular group, we're all different. We're all aligned, and what brings us together is but we have different strengths, and we're not trying to replicate things. Carol alluded to it as well, that, you know, creating efficiencies and trusting each other is critical to all of this. So we know it's OTEC, and this can be this model can be applied in other places as well. But OTEC to us, you know, very, very similar to the Ojibwe. The Ojibwe and the Three Fires Confederacy were the providers, while OTEC's the provider of the structure and the educational elements we need to help prepare people for success in the industry. So if they're getting involved for the first time, or they've been doing it for a long time, you know, getting some of that training that'll help them thrive in the industry, it's there with OTEC. They provide that structure for us. They provide that content for us. And now it's not in isolation. They always, you know, engage with us or with TIAO and different perspectives of the industry as well, so that it's relevant and it makes sense to be training people to certain things that they're being trained. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You know, TIAO, for example, they're known in Ontario to be, you know, the voice for tourism. They're the voice for tourism in Ontario, and I've been in those rooms. I've seen it with ministers, with government, both provincially and federally. They're fighters, they're warriors, they're advocators. And when you make that comparison to the Three Fires Confederacy, right, the Odawa people were the warriors. When we look at TIAO, as they're the warriors, they're just in a different way. They're warriors in the boardroom, in, you know, at Queen's Park. They're there advocating for our sector, and that's a really important role. Now, we all do all of this work, you know, in our own rights individually as well, but hey, they're experts in that. Why are we trying to duplicate it? Let the experts do the work, and let's support and contribute where we can if there's a good, healthy relationship there. Now, last but not least, the Potawatomi and the Three Fires Confederacy were the firekeepers. And that's kind of what our role, you know, we take care of it at ITO in terms of all of the elements. We bring the Indigenous tourism industry there. We maintain that fire, maintain those relationships with our four directions that we mentioned earlier. And we bring them to, you know, what we would call in sort of modern terms, the mainstream industry. And we dovetail it together so that they're heard, so that they're involved. And you've seen that, you know, that little video from Stan Wesley, that's a part of our training that we helped develop with OTEC. So it's very much infused throughout the work that we do. In TIAO, you know, they bring it all together with us. And in the more recent model and the more, I'll say, corporate structure of things is, simply put, OTEC provides the training, we bring the people to the table. TIAO helps marry us up with the industry, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous businesses, because the whole industry is in a labor crisis, not just the Indigenous tourism industry, the whole industry. And they need good people who are trained well, who are set up for success to be involved. And that's the basis of the Three Fires Collaborative Quest, inspired by the Three Fires Confederacy governance model. And you know, it's a very, very enjoyable process. We all stay in our lanes. We do our thing. We, get together when we need to. We talk about issues if they come up, and we celebrate successes together. And Isabelle, that in a nutshell is the Three Fires Collaborative Quest.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's very it's really a new initiative, and it's a new way of partnering that is, I think, a great example for the rest of the country, definitely. So, Carol, let us explain a little bit about your side of things. So, about employer engagement, corporate partnership, alignment. How did this project go for you?
Well, most certainly we continue to work with ITO and OTEC in this process, even with the engagement with the employers, because we all wanted to ensure that we were delivering the same message at the same time and working with contacts that each other had that might be unique, and so that we were reaching the most amount of people. I would say that, especially as the majority of this happened during the pandemic, most of the events were virtual, the employer to employee events, where we had both non-Indigenous and Indigenous employers that were available, but with Indigenous employees. And so one of the things that we did is we worked very closely with the Ontario Friendship Centers, as well as the post-secondary schools that have Indigenous culture centers or Indigenous culture studies, to really sort of reach out. And once again, about efficiencies, right? It's finding out where you can talk to the most amount of people that can really represent your message. And so that's how we worked with them. And we held these sessions on a pretty regular basis, communicating to them in the ways that worked best for them as well. One of the things that we have with Indigenous Tourism Ontario is we extend membership to all of the Indigenous tourism operators that are members of ITO. And so there was a communication down to them as well, that to encourage them as employers to come and participate in this as well.
Well, thank you, Carol. Adam, can you tell us a little more about the Indigenous tourism training series and the training that you provided for this project?
Absolutely. So on the training side of things, over the past couple of years, OTEC and ITO have started to build out a culturally adapted and branded portfolio of Indigenous tourism training that, going forward, ITO can lead the delivery on to its own network and membership. This has been a really long time coming. It's something Kevin and I have been speaking about and and hoping to tackle for years. But over the past few years, we managed to put together the resources from a couple of different projects, OTEC projects and ITO projects, to get the work started. So what that includes is, it's largely on our end started with adapting OTEC content. So we've adapted the Service Excellence program, the Leading for Excellence leadership program, as well as the Coaching for Excellence program. And the scenarios have all been adapted. And you saw Stan Wesley, I mean, that's a clip from one of the programs. They've all been adapted to reflect Indigenous tourism communities and tourism experiences across Ontario. And the content has been adapted in consultation with Indigenous operators and learners to reflect Indigenous ways of knowing. So the core standards are OTEC, but it really is a new set of training that ITO will be leading on. As part of that process, we also began to work with the Indigenous business advisors that represent ITO in the field. And so the IBAs went through an adapted version of OTEC's training and facilitation excellence program. So they're now certified, and they're developing this content, and they become almost a support group within themselves to help become better and better at that delivery model. And I think one of the key things about the partnership as well is, on an ongoing basis, even incoming opportunities and leads from Indigenous tourism networks that OTEC might receive, we can now refer those to ITO to take the lead on. And so really starting to think about that seamless referral management across the network to position ITO as the lead in this space. So we're really excited about that.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam. I guess we'll go to the next step, meaning that you still have work to do, definitely. So what would be, Kevin, the next project that you have on the table?
Yeah, so next project, so I'm gonna get into that in the next slide, just really quickly, what things we can do now, like, or that we still need to work on, in my humble opinion, Isabelle, is we need to simply continue to be better neighbors.
Mhm.
We need to continue to get to know each other. We need to get to, be better at being accepting of others, being more inclusive. Like Carol has said, we're a part of the regular conversation now. But that's not always the case with every organization and in every part of Canada. It's here in Ontario in the tourism sector, but it's not in other sectors within Ontario. And the reason for that is there's good people who are genuine about trying to work together to create some common good. And, with OTEC and TIAO, they reach out to us all the time. We have conversations all the time about different things, and it's that trust factor. And things we need to work on, simply enough, I summarize it as we need to be better neighbors. Adam got into some of the things that he's going to be launching with OTEC. We're involved in that, right? It's having those constant conversations, and when we talk about the Three Fires Collaborative Quest, for example, there's no need there for all of us to be at the forefront. We all don't need to be, at the photo ops. It's about the people first. It's about the operators first. It's about serving the communal good first. And when we do that, we see really great things. So getting into your question about, where do we need to go, or what work do we still have to do, and what's upcoming, that's always the fun stuff. Of course, growing on what we have. ITO is still fairly young, but if we could switch the slide to the next one, you'll see where we're kind of going. And it may look very simplistic, but I'm going to explain it. ITO has only been around since 2018, and we're still building infrastructure within the organization. When you look at this, for someone like me, or somebody Indigenous, somebody in Eshkawkogan, for example, they look at this, they might see the resemblance of something like 4 directions and 4 quadrants in there, with something bringing it together. One of the evolutions that we're doing is some programming that's geared towards younger people, younger Indigenous people, younger First Nations people, to learn about their culture. It's not under the auspices of reconciliation, and there's people who are dedicated to that, to revitalizing the culture. What we're doing here is, yes, we're doing those things, but we're teaching people about a lot of different things. And it stems from my time at the Great Spirit Circle Trail, where we had people coming to work for us, even though we didn't pay as high as some other employers. They came to work for us because they got to learn about who they were. They took pride in that. They went home and taught their family members about their own culture. In their downtime, they were encouraged to pick up a book in our library that we created ourselves, right? So that they could learn about, different things. And why this slide's here with these 5 different logos is there's 4 seasonal logos there. There's teachings in our culture that happen year round, but there's some things that can only happen in certain seasons.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
The wording modules that align with all of these little pieces that are in each of these logos. You can see there's all kinds of little things in there, like a medicine wheel, like a squash, a pumpkin. There's fish in there. There's an eagle staff. There's stretching a hide. All of these things you can't just learn at in a classroom. This is land-based learning, and that's the type of curriculum, if you're going to use that term, that we're implementing and creating. And this is really exciting work. It's not happening anywhere else, and it's all tied to something. So the basic idea here, Isabelle, is on those four logos. Each of the 4 seasons, you're going to learn a bunch of that stuff, but you may not learn it all in one season. It may take multiple seasons over years. Once you learn them all, then you're really well set up for success within the industry. Exemplified by that middle logo there. There's a ton of things to learn. And as we structure this with a model that brings together how the industry conducts itself and what has happened in this country in terms of things around the lines of reconciliation and rectifying issues, and instilling pride in Indigenous people. It's going to strengthen the Ontario tourism economy and the Canadian tourism economy. But this is one thing that's really, really, really exciting. There's a huge investment going into this, and it's work that we've had in mind and we've been working towards for years now. And now it's being put into practice. I'm really excited to see what the next, 3 years holds for us, because, this stuff here, what we're developing this year, there's nothing like it anywhere in the world. It's the first of its kind. And when you're passionate and you have a vision for it and you've got an excited team, there's some exciting things that are going to come from it. And operators and young people alike are going to be wanting to have a career in tourism. And that's one of the big things we've got going on. And I can only share so much, because we do have government support and there are only certain things that I can share, but it's a lot of fun. It's an exciting path that we're on, and it's going to be the bulk of our work for the next couple of years.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's a very natural way of learning things, going back to the seasons and nature and what's around us at a certain time of the year. I'm really intrigued by that Indigenous Cultural Engagement Program, and I would like Adam to talk a little bit about OTEC's role in that project.
So this is a program, and it's based on a lot of mutual demand and requests that we've had and ITO's had, and I'm sure TIAO as well. It will be a program focused on to the non-tourism industry audience, on learning how to engage. So not a cultural awareness program per se, but a program focused on the process of engagement, because it is different from community to community. And so how do you negotiate what engagement can and should look like on the terms of those you're trying to work with and partner with within the industry? So I'll echo Kevin to say that there's not a whole heck of a lot more I can say at this point, but we will be announcing more news on that program and how it'll unfold in the coming months. But yeah, I mean, it's time for it. There's a lot of demand across our networks for a program like this, and the building blocks are starting to come together for it. Other 2023 steps that we're rolling out. We are also adding a new self-care program, so a wellness-oriented self-care programming to the Indigenous cultural, or to the adapted Indigenous tourism training series. We'll be working with ITO to update some of our guiding training, which has been really popular over the past number of years in some of our northern communities. We look to expand access to that. We're also working on some technology and infrastructure to support ITO with in-house training coordination and some of the records management that's really, really important as a training organization. And so, yeah, there's a lot of work still to do, but the momentum is there. And, from my perspective, Three Fires is really a concept. It started with a project, but the ways in which these three organizations work together, moving forward, we'll be pulling from many, many different sources of resources, demand, funding, and continuing to work in these sorts of ways. And I think it's very beneficial.
Well, thank you, Adam. We would like to have a few minutes for the questions, so maybe I'll let Carol wrap up the discussion, just maybe a minute or two.
No problem. I was just going to say that, like in any good relationship, you got to revisit it every once in a while. And so we're right in the process right now of revisiting our MOUs, both with OTEC and with ITO, because relationships evolve. And so we've, as Adam just said, it's no longer a project, it's sort of a concept. It's how we move forward. And so that needs to be also reflected in our MOU. When it comes to working with ITO, yes, this was a project. Yes, advocacy, we're continually advocating on their behalf with the ministry and alongside with them. But also, they're directly infused in any events that we do, because that's the right thing to do. And so it's sort of in every area, and that needs to be reflected in our MOUs. And so, I would really encourage any tourism operators that are online, with those programs that Adam's just spoken about, and also with ITO, they have their Indigenous business advisors, they have their cultural authenticity program that really is spread across Ontario. So, there's individuals that you can connect with that work with Indigenous Tourism Ontario that can really help you as you're wanting to work more closely with the organizations. And so, and if I say nothing else, ask questions. It works. It really does.
Well, you're totally right. So we'll run. Thank you so much, Kevin, Adam, and Carol, for sharing all this this very interesting experience. So I'm gonna move to the Q&A session. So maybe I'll ask Lyndon if there's any questions, and I'll stop sharing for now in the chat. Let's look at this. Okay. So I think there's one question. When would the training be available to members? So I guess it's talking about the current training.
I can answer this one really quickly. Simply enough, some of it already is available. We've been running the Three Fires Collaborative Quest now for a couple of years, but we're working on more, and there's going to be even more stuff coming forward. What I described last, that's in the works for, say, entry level or younger people to get interested in the industry, but there's a ton there. And yeah, so just reach out to us. There's some things that can be offered now for adult learners or those who have been in the industry a while, but there's a lot more coming, so just stay tuned.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so great presentation from Dylan. Look forward to working together. So, great people participating today. Any more questions? I know that it's working on the federal level of things. I think Ontario has a leading experience that need to be shared elsewhere. And of course, like you mentioned, Kevin, things are really local, especially when you talk about the workforce. It's all local. It's looking at the community and see how this community work together and can be involved in tourism. And it's different from one community to the other, but there's values that you develop, the way you work together. That could be something that could be very inspiring for other groups and other regions of Canada, other provinces and territories. So thank you so much. I don't see any more questions. Well, of course, if you have some questions that you didn't think about or you want to ask, either Carol, Kevin, or Adam, I'm sure they're going to be very happy to answer your questions if you reach out directly to him. And I see that Kevin put his number, so thank you so much, Miigwech, Kevin. I'll just wrap up the session now. I'm gonna just share that so people can. Okay, here we go. So just about the time today. Thank you, Kevin, Adam, and Carol, for sharing your thoughts and experiences with us. And to everybody who took the time to submit a question, and it was a fascinating conversation. As this webinar draws to a close, I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I hope you have found some useful tools that you can apply in your own businesses today. If you have, please share what you've learned with friends and colleagues and send them the link to the webinar, which will be available later this week on TIAO's website. And to find the webinar recording, search TIAO and Forward Motion, and you'll also be able to download the presentation and watch the other webinars in the series. Our next webinar will be recorded live on June 13, and we'll explore how you can introduce elements of a blended workforce in your tourism business. One last heartfelt thank you to Kevin, Adam, and Carol for their engaging discussion today, and to TIAO, who have been our partner in creating this webinar series. The webinar was brought to you by THRC's Discover Tourism Initiative. For up-to-date labor market information, practical human resource development tools, and other useful resources, please visit our corporate website at tourismhr.ca or go directly to discovertourism.ca website. Thanks again for joining me today. I hope to see you next month.